Many times slaves run away and lie hid, lurking in swamps, woods, and other obscure places, killing hogs and committing other injuries to the inhabitants of this territory. You know, the first time I read that, I thought it was an excerpt from a prophetic civil rights poem. Maybe something from the Harlem Renaissance era. But it's actually the preamble for the first fugitive slave law in Florida's history, signed in 1822 by William Pope Duval, the first territorial governor of Florida and the namesake of Jacksonville's Duval County. While modern history books and conversations will downplay the impact that slavery has had on America's growth, making it seem as if slavery was a choice, as if a runaway slave could just hop on I-95 to freedom. In reality, runaway slaves were the first organized protesters in American history, breaking society's ideological perspectives and social norms about human rights. But they were met with something they couldn't comprehend, prepare for, or know how to influence: policy. And today, after 400 years of protesting, we are in the exact same position. The point I'm trying to get across to you today is we have the blueprint to make a Black life matter in America. But in order to make that dream a reality, to rekindle that dream, we must bridge the gap between the passion of our protest and learning to strategically change the structure and narrative of American politics. As a young hip hop lobbyist, I remember when my little brother was going to Ole Miss, the University of Mississippi. That summer we were taking him to college. I had the wild idea to take a trip to learn more about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life and legacy before the unveiling of his statue on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. I was living in Tallahassee at the time and took weekend trips to Atlanta, his birthplace, to his home in Montgomery, where many nights he helped implement and strategize the movement for civil rights, and the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, where he died. See, it wasn't until that journey that I learned of Dr. King's Poor People's Campaign, a campaign that would have put teeth into the dream. See, in 1967, the Poor People's Campaign fought for the same issues that drive the narrative of the Stay Woke movement today: police brutality, a living wage, access to affordable health care, affordable housing, child care, our choice of education, and the need for more job creation in our communities. But I'm baffled how 52 years after a campaign to address the socioeconomic problems impacting poor people, Black people, and all people living in this country, we're still stuck at square one. See, in 1967, Dr. King realized that the riots and protests throughout American history had done all they could. But at that point, they were fruitless. That the only way we would be able to effectuate change, real change, to gain a sense of equity in America, we would have to sit at the table to strategically influence the legislation that impacts our community. But then again, there's been an ideological split within our own culture about the right path for Blacks in America. That split has happened between the House Negro and the Field Negro, Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois, or Du Bois, depending on the bourgeois of your vernacular, Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, Black Democrats and Black Republicans, and more recently, Colin Kaepernick and Jay-Z. And while all of these dominating opinions have something that really stresses the fact of what would create the best livelihood for Blacks living in America, in reality, none of their opinions had a recurring solution or built a foundation for the future. But it was designed that way. See, for generations, Black people, our culture, we were legally illiterate and ignorant to the fact that the government controlled every aspect of our life, from who we could marry to where we could live, how we would run away as slaves, and then how we would survive while being Black in America. And for every injustice throughout American history, we protested. Early protesters wanted freedom. Freedom to sleep at night without having to worry about their wife or daughter being raped. Yes, time is up. But every plantation in America was a Me Too movement. It's in some of our DNA. And they wanted the same freedom not to see their children be sold like a MacBook Pro or iPhone on eBay. 60 years ago, our grandparents wanted the simple things in life, like voting or coming to the Florida Theater to see a play, maybe a TED Talk. But they were met with these demonstrators right outside those doors. And when the Blacks in this community continued to come to downtown Jacksonville to try to eat at our restaurants and shop at our stores, they were met with wooden axe handles and bats a few blocks from where you're sitting right now. And today, a protest is nothing more than a trendy social media post. Sitting on a panel to discuss a plan about creating a plan about a plan, and then by the time we get so frustrated that we decide to lay our burdens at the altar, we're reminded by a politician that we need to register and get out to vote. And for the last 50 years, our souls have been so woke that we fell asleep at the wheel of progress because we haven't looked at the whole system of government and how it impacts our quality of life. So here's a question for you. If you could only choose one thing that impacts your quality of life today, would you care more about your voting rights or your credit? How many of you say voting rights? Impacting your quality of life. How many of you say credit? About a split in the whole audience. And I know some of you subconsciously may be thinking voting and credit rights are two different things. And politics will say that's not germane. There's no there. I think I heard the gentleman over here whisper to his neighbor, somebody needs to tell this hip-hop guy that credit and voting are two different things. But are they? Within 2 years of passing the Civil Rights Act of 1968, the United States Congress passed the Fair Credit Reporting Act of 1970, requiring banks and other financial institutions to keep a certain record of transactions with the U.S. Treasury and for that information to be used for other purposes. Remember, this is the same United States Congress that for more than 70 years, their number one priority wasn't gun reform or health care. It was runaway fugitive slave laws. Laws that required what shall, must, and may happen to runaway slaves that are caught in neighboring slave states, free states, or on the Underground Railroad. Now, we all know the power of our credit and our voting rights, so I'm not saying don't vote. But what I am saying is that it's not a coincidence, that it's political strategy. And until we take a strategic approach to the policies that really impact the quality of a black life, we will continue to be asleep at the wheel of progress. Has anybody else realized that in 2019, the common sense argument for helping blacks in America revolves around reparations and criminal justice reform? And not to downplay those two issues, but it makes it seem as if every black person has already been incarcerated, or as if I know what to do with a mule in 2019. But the police are killing our black boys and girls. You know, last Saturday, they killed Aunt Tatiana Jefferson while she was playing video games with her nephew in her home. And for the last 100 years, the counter argument has always been, well, wait, hold on. What about black-on-black crime? What about Chicago, as if Chicago is the mecca of black-on-black crime in the world? And what normally happens are these two opinions have a heated argument, but nobody ever changes their perspective or delivers a solution. Well, here's something. What about the cost to the taxpayers? Over $100 million being spent litigating cases and paying families for police misconduct instead of keeping campaign promises to rebuild roads, create jobs. Maybe creating a tax break so a healthier food option can come into our neighborhoods so McDonald's isn't the only 24-hour food option that we have. Regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, I'm quite sure we can all agree that there's a better way to spend that money. Maybe it can be used on race and implicit bias training with police officers. Better yet, if we're willing to give Dylan Roof and Nicholas Cruz the benefit of the doubt for mental health being their reasons they shot up a church in Charleston, South Carolina, and a school in Parkland, Florida, then why aren't we labeling black-on-black crime a systemic mental health issue too? And when we start talking about mental health, let's not link everything back to slavery. Because over the last 10 years, the suicide rate amongst black teenage females has gone up 182%, and 60% amongst black boys. The pain a mother feels when her son is shot dead at the hands of the police is no greater than the pain a father feels when he finds his daughter dead in their home. The reality is our kids and the police aren't just killing each other, they're killing themselves. And according to a study by the University of Michigan, suicide is the second highest killer amongst blacks today, higher than heart disease, cancer, gang violence, accidental shootings, and police brutality. But why isn't suicide prevention a top priority within the black culture? Maybe it's because subconsciously we think of somebody who commits suicide as if they're weak. They're not greater than more than a hashtag on our timelines to pay respect for their life. And then again, if a white person or the police doesn't kill us, then I guess it really doesn't matter. And until we redefine what it really means to make a black life matter, we will never see real change. See, by changing that narrative, we're able to find common ground with people who may politically, socially, and ideologically differ from our viewpoint. I've learned that sometimes the only difference between a fiscal conservative and a progressive liberal is the time and cost it's going to take to deliver a permanent solution for the people. And if history has taught us anything, is that we don't have much time to waste. If we want to create the world our grandchildren will be proud of, we have to start the work today. See, something happened that summer. We were taking my little brother to Ole Miss. I would say something that fundamentally changed my perspective and outlook on life and the future of the black culture. See, as I was driving through that fertile territory of cotton fields and plantations in Mississippi and Alabama, I thought about the prayers of the runaway slave on the promise to make America great. I realized that society's narrative told the runaway slave that you needed certain prerequisites in order to effectuate change. You had to be an elected official, maybe a lawyer, a preacher, maybe have an Ivy League education, come from an affluent family, or be an entertainer. Maybe even have 100,000 followers on Instagram. But we realized that society's narrative didn't fit for the runaway slave. Throughout history, it hasn't fit for some of us, and in reality, it never fit for me. My story, plain and simple, and not a lot of my friends know this, but I'll share it with you today. I never wanted to work in politics. Politics chose me. I've been working in customer service since I was 13. I've been your neighborhood bag boy, banker, valet, front desk clerk, overnight stalker, and teacher's assistant. And that was all before my last semester at the Florida A&M University, when I was called into my day job at the DoubleTree Hotel in downtown Tallahassee and fired, causing me to drop out of college for the second time, only to take an unpaid internship in Florida's capital to learn the political process because I had nothing else to do. Little did I know that when I started that journey, I would go on to become one of the few and youngest black lobbyists in this state, help elect members to the United States Congress and Florida legislature, help the same college I dropped out of maintain the accreditation for their school of pharmacy by securing millions from the state legislature for my alma mater. And before my wife and I moved to Jacksonville last year, for the past 4 years, we've been working for families and children living in communities like Eureka Gardens, getting over $400,000 in resources from the state for mental health, substance abuse, and after-school reading programs so we can give those kids a second and better chance at life. I never thought that I would be able to take my customer service experience and the strategic and mental fortitude I built through playing games like John Madden football, NBA 2K, chess, and spades, and be able to effectuate change and change policies to improve the quality of life for other people throughout this state and this country. So here's an idea. Find the legislation that stirs the passion of your protest. Take a strategic approach to changing that policy to improve the quality of life in your neighborhood, your city, and your state, and our country. Because the prayer and the premise of making America great again is always rooted in the simple fact that real change will always come through policy, not protest. Thank you.